Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on the Dark Matter Digital Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and a special thank you to my master and producer, Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is John Stormm. And John was born in 1953 in a family of hereditary witches that count their ancestry all too many centuries ago in ancient Tara. He was raised and trained in the craft as the only male witch in his family by his grandmother. He has grandchildren of his own. He began serious martial arts training in 1963. His sensei became his father figure. He strove for perfection, holding a second-degree black belt in Mas Oyamas Karate and a master's ranking in Chinese Kenpo. And by the early 1970s, between training for tournaments and running his own small chain of studios, he took radio and TV broadcasting at Paso Community College in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This gave John his first taste of journalism. 30-plus years later, and dying to write some of these experiences in a book, he wrote an entire series in the Witch Clan theme. These are character-driven stories with true-to-life characters and experiences melded into an entertaining fantasy. His first full-length novel is in the Witch series Matriarch of the Witch Clan, and readers are encouraged to visit his website at www.witchclan.com. And it looks like the feds took that down. So to correspond with the author or get information on the next release, he and his family sponsor and are also registered as Witches of the World at the Witches Box, witchbox.com, and can be found in their archives. John has his books available on BookRix, and one of which is called Practical Witchery. And it's available for free on BookRix, so you can access that. And for the longest time, he has kept his MK Ultra exposure rather low-key. Quote, "It's that it always seems to be too much for people to get their heads around, and it's no fun drawing out these experiences for them. Even then, his craft is as much a part of him as breathing." And it is with great pleasure during this full moon, we welcome John to the show this evening. Hello there, John.
Howdy.
Hi. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, it'll be fun.
Oh, it's going to be a blast. And of course, we have this beautiful full moon, super moon. So a good time to conjure up some good energy and discuss a lot of things coming around the corner here. What have you been up to?
Mostly doing some paranormal studies of my area. There's a fellow wrote a book called Haunted Hillsboro. I'm in Hillsboro, New Hampshire, or Hillsboro County. And it's listed as one of the top haunted places in America, next to New Orleans and someplace else. But we got some really great energy. So it's not all bad haunts, though some of it's kind of a bit on the strange or sad side. So I've been studying what I can. I got a bunch of paranormal equipment to check out things. And just right around within hiking distance of the house, there's all kinds of really great places.
That sounds awesome. Hey, is that author Sam Baltrusis, by the way?
I believe so.
I just wondered because
he's got a series called Haunted America.
That sounds like Sam. I'm going to double check that, but I'm pretty sure anyways. But yeah, it sounds like a really good read for sure. And also, now you were talking about some of the hot spots there. What are some of the giveaways insofar as a paranormal hotspot that you've been noticing?
Well, when I the easy thing is when I snap pictures with my digital camera, I get a lot of orb activity. I've been up to America's Stonehenge up here near Salem, New Hampshire. Got lots of orb activity there. I get a lot out on the back deck. Little ways from here was a place called Bradford Springs. There used to be a hotel there. Back in the 1800s, the Native Americans used the area before that for, to bring their sick and their wounded for healing. So it has a lot of otherworld type of energy to it. I'm told they call this the Granite State, but I'm told we're sitting on a really huge quartz deposit. And I got to say, this whole place just resonates with all kinds of energy. When I take my millimeter around, sometimes I get energies that's off the chart. You watch some of these paranormal investigative shows there, and, when they get readings like 0.07 and stuff, they're saying, yeah, we got stuff, and stuff starts happening. And, they get readings of 0.22 and such like that, and that's about the time they want to go screaming out of the house like little girls. And we get numbers like 5.27, and it's incredible around here.
Oh, wow. Yeah, highly charged, without a doubt. And I'm sure that correlates with vortexes and places like that, right?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And my health is Well, I mean, I'm still diabetic. I still have seizures and stuff like that. But I mean, there's so much of my health that just completely reversed. I mean, I was dying about this time last year.
Mhm.
Um, that doesn't seem to be the case now.
Right. You're regenerating, and I'm really glad to hear that. We touched on that off air, and I'm really pleased to think
Yeah,
that that moving and changing the vibration of your previous location has altered that to such an extent. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, it's almost indescribable.
Yeah, that's what I call real miracle in motion right there. So we're grateful for that. I know that for sure. And of course, in the season of the witch and Samhain coming around the corner here on the 31st, I wanted to touch base with you about ideas for celebration, ceremony, kind of touching in and reflecting on the ancestral lineage and how you choose to celebrate Samhain.
Well, I'm gonna do it a little bit different this year. But I'm going to keep the general focus that our ancestors always had. Um, I know what all the Gothic, witchcraft became something else after Christianity came about, and these warlock clergy kind of took over things, and start misguiding people as to exactly what their souls were. A lot of Christians think that they have a soul, but they kind of got it backwards. It's kind of like you are a soul. Jesus saved your soul. It's kind of like, yeah, that was all taken care of. It's not like it's got something you can lose and you're going to walk around. You can kind of give it away, but by selling yourself out to this world paradigm we have here. But what we were as Celts before Christianity came, and what the craft was before then, was very different than what it's painted as, around Halloween this year. The Celts' idea of death is a part of life. It's a part of our life. We don't really die. The body dies, and we had a very different idea of how we handled our dead and dealt with our dead. And it almost seems to be a misnomer to call them dead, but just for the sake of keeping it from being too confusing, we'll kind of cover that. In ancient times, say grandma died, they would put her in a place that had like a stone wall around it. There'd be like four big stones. And so you could kind of keep the vermin out of it, or, well, actually, you wanted a certain amount of vermin, beetles, larvae, crows, ravens, and stuff to come in and pick the bones clean. Okay, so her body would be put in that. There's no top on it. When the bones were nice and clean, they never put filthy bodies in a cairn. You ever seen those dolmens and cairns with all the spirals carved on them?
Right.
That they stacked clean, polished bones in there. So, when grandma died and when her bones were picked clean, those clean bones were put inside that cairn. And around this time of year, when the veil is thinnest, you want to get a hold of grandma. You miss her wisdom. There's some things you need to know. You would go sit in that cairn in the dark and maybe hold grandma's femur for a while, and you would commune with her. This is your contact point with her spirit. Her eternal spirit. That part don't ever die. When your spirit gets let loose, this body drops. It turns back to dirt, which is Mother Danu, Mother Nature, Mother Earth. You're a child of two parents. You always were, and the Father of all spirits. So you belonged in the universe. There was no disconnection that everybody has today.
Mm-hmm.
I got to take a trip to go find myself. It's like, you were always there. When you woke up this morning, that was you. You
Right.
may have been confused, but that was you. There's more to learn. You have eternity to learn it. But that was how Samhain was looked at back then. Death wasn't quite such a grisly thing, as people would look at that now as, with different eyes, but back then that was a very, very natural thing. And it was that way for thousands and thousands of years before, anybody even invented a devil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how our families looked at it. Now, for me this year, I've been doing those paranormal studies, like I says, from around the area, and it's kind of an interesting history. This house that I'm living in was built in 1769. Back then, we had a Marquess of Hillsborough, an Earl of Hillsborough. You know, this was all British royalty here. In fact, there's a little town not far from here called Antrim. That's named after the America's first bioterrorist. General Antrim was the one that introduced the blankets with smallpox to the local Indians, who incidentally were quite friendly. But they happened to have something he wanted, namely all this land. But anyway, there was a lot of Puritans and a lot of very, very strict Christian dogma. Now, this is not the same Christianity that Jesus taught in the first century. You know, when they talked about the Jews and the Gentiles was anybody who wasn't a Jew. And anybody who wasn't a Jew back then were pagans, like us.
Mm-hmm.
We got more in common with first century Christians than they do. If they looked at Christianity today, they wouldn't recognize it, or even Christianity a couple hundred years ago. Very strict, very, geez, you scratch yourself in the wrong place, you're going to go to hell for it. God is some cranky old white man sitting on a throne in the clouds, just ready to beat you down the first time you touch yourself or somebody else in the wrong place at the wrong time. They had a very, very unrealistic vision of God. And of course, he didn't like the pagans and the Indians as much as he liked white people. And it's kind of like, this is a very small, petty God for being the creator of the universe. So what we have here is we have all of these cemeteries and places that have haunts. And a lot of these people, they weren't necessarily bad people. And especially the way we have bad people now is just, ridiculous. These were people that tried their best and felt that they failed. So they're wandering around. They don't know which way to go, which way to turn, where, that they could rejoin their ancestors. I don't deserve it because I did this, or I failed to do that, or I didn't put enough money in the church offering plate. And this was not the stuff that Jesus taught. And that's not what they got taught. So they're very confused. Mm-hmm. And I found out when I visited the Bradford Springs old hotel site, there was about 7 spirits hanging around there. And each of them kind of felt guilty about not being able to help everybody else, or not being good enough, or all this other kind of stuff. And I made a little ceremony and I talked to them. I had taken pictures and there was all kinds of orb activity. And I went down with my Mel meter and my REM pods and all that kind of stuff. And I was getting all kinds of activity. So I says, if you'll listen, I'll talk to you. And it's like, I don't want anything from you. I just want to share something with you. I'm your brother. And I shared with them, exactly how great the creator actually is, not so petty as to, the creator of the universe, how big the universe is, how big God really is. I went over some things that Jesus taught that they should remember, and they did remember. And I says, now you see, you know you're immortal because there you are. You worried about your soul, but you are your soul. This is where you are. Your bodies have long since broken down to dirt, as they should. You're a child of Mother Earth, and you're a child of the Father of all spirits. You're immortal. There you are. You should know this better than anybody. Now, let me tell you the good news here. Now, I'm not preaching from Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, but I threw some of that in because it was relevant. But it's kind of like you got ancestors, just scores and scores of ancestors just waiting to take you in and take you back into themselves. And, you belong to this. And I did an EVP. My camera wasn't working good at the time, or my video camera wasn't. But I did get the EVP recording of the whole thing. And I had the spirit box going. And at the end of that, they said, thank you. Very distinct. How many of there are you? There's 7 of us. And by the time it's kind of like, you can leave. They said, thank you. So then a few weeks later, I come back and so who's here? And I got a REM pod way down at one end set off and a REM pod at the other end, but there was no orb activity, taking pictures all over the place. And so the only thing that there was out there was negative and wouldn't get close because I was burning copal on my little makeshift altar.
Mm.
And, it's not going to get close to that. So it's like they were free. So I end up closer to home here the last few weeks. I've been checking out the hill, the mountain behind me. And I did a little video. It's on YouTube. It's called October Ritual. It's on my Storm 53 YouTube if you want to check it out. This time there's 25 spirits up on that hill. I mean, they answered clearly. How many are you? There's 25. And someone named Elapukwe. I don't, It sounds kind of native or something like that. I don't know. Some of them I'm pretty sure aren't human at all because they register on the millimeter. I mean, off the charts. I mean, it makes the stuff you see on the TV, ghost paranormal huntings and that look small, very small. It's incredible. So in keeping with Samhain, getting back to it, when the veil is thinnest between here and there, I plan on going up and conducting a ritual. I bring my horn for the wild hunt. I'm going to call my quarters with it, set up my altar. I'm going to set it up during the day, but I'm going to come back in the evening. Some torches. I'll bring the camera and the paranormal equipment there. Do a calling. Invite them. I'll set up the spirit box and kind of just see what happens. See what shakes loose. It's bound to be interesting. And just kind of greet them. And I'm a part of this world and they're part of mine. And actually we all are. It's not just me and it's not just you and those of us that call ourselves witches or are called witches, but it's actually all of us. We all belong to this. A bigger world than what we're shown, there was a saying, I can't remember if it was John or James in the New Testament says, if you can't love your brother whom you can see, how can you say you love God whom you can't see? And it's like our relationship, the Kota Sioux have a saying, Meteklie Oyasin, which means all of our relations, we're all related. When they talk about it, they're not just talking about, hey, we're related to black guys and Muslim guys and Chinese guys and stuff like that. No, we're related to the coyote, to the rattlesnake, to the raven, to the hawk, to the earth, to the rocks. We are related, we have our place in this entire universe. We have our niche. We are eternal. It's like the universe already knows that. It's just us that's got to get a handle on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, well said indeed. And when you see or experience some of these spirits, why do you think they're there? Do you think they're there to visit you? It sounds like some of them might be a little bit disoriented, but at the same time, it seems like they're just visiting.
Some of them, I believe, are earthbound because of what they were taught in their lives and drilled, and they were programmed. People have been programmed, maybe not with quite the tech that we have today, but they got programmed by their churches, by their, authorities and everything to believe in things being a certain way, a very petty way, a very two-dimensional way. And that is not reality. And they don't understand what reality is. They're in it, but they don't understand. They don't know how to cope with it. And of course they wouldn't.
Right.
So we have a lot of earthbound spirits here that are human spirits. There are a lot of nature spirits here. This is a beautiful place with a powerful energy. We're sitting on top of a huge quartz deposit that just resonates like crazy.
Nice.
And the neat thing about quartz is, scientifically speaking, this just isn't New Age hoodoo. Actually, I'm very ancient age hoodoo. I'm very old school witch.
Yes.
I'm not,
Thank goodness.
Yeah. But there is some scientific basis for the things that I'm talking about. I do have a couple degrees. I can't argue these. Some of my best friends are physicists, and we have some of the most marvelous discussions. But quartz is what they call a piezoelectric type mineral. With whatever energy you pump into it, it will vibrate, it will resonate in accordance with the energy pumped into it. It could be electrical energy, electromagnetic energy, you can do laser energy, all kinds of stuff, and it will vibrate according to whatever it is you pump in it and the size and the shape and that of the quartz itself. So it is a type of a lot of haunts aren't really an intelligent creature being there. Sometimes when really intense things, emotions were high, there were wars, there were murders and stuff like that, an area will resonate with that energy for a long time. And what you get is kind of like a replay of what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
And in the spot that I'm in, evidently everything was pretty nice here. People lived good lives here, and I mean the house that I'm in and everything. It just resonates with that kind of energy.
Right.
It's just here. Sometimes I can hear voices of people talking, and it's not like arguments; they're just talking. I mean, even when I'm the only one, excuse me, the only one here in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that is just resonant energy. But there's also nature spirits, elementals, fae, you would call them. People think of angels and demons. That's very two-dimensional. My grandma used to think of it in more of a tripartite. She'd think of angels, that serve the father of all spirits. Demons would serve whomever. She never considered Luciferians as real witches. How could you be wise if you're worshiping something evil, knowing that evil's going to come back on you? Mm-hmm. And then there was the Fae, a little more neutral, that served Mother Danu or Mother Nature. What's the guardian angel of a chipmunk or a skunk look like? Well, a Fae, pixie, it's an angelic creature, but not, when you think of angels, you think of God or something holy, and you think of demons, you think of something strictly dark, and we tend to think of them as like people. Are all black people bad or good or warm or nice, or are all white people this, that, or the other thing? No, everybody is according to their own penchant, their own inclinations. And it's true of all the other spirits as well. What you are, what you choose is what really defines you. There's the old saying, is a man a thief because he steals, or does he steal because he's a thief? Because he has those larcenous inclinations. It comes from within. Jesus says, you wash the inside of the cup, the outside will be clean. He used to hate the religious crowds. That man was the most anti-religious person that I've ever heard of or ever read of. He dealt with the Pharisees. He called them a generation of vipers. He says, you're like whited sepulchres. You're all white and beautiful on the inside or on the outside, but inside you're full of all dead men's bones and all uncleanness, corruption, rot, decay. And it was what was inside of them that was coming out. They'd play these big religious games, and then they'd be evicting widows and orphans from their homes, for the money. And we're seeing that all over the place today. Right. They call America a Christian nation. It's 3,000 miles wide, Christian from one end to the other, but about a quarter-inch deep. Mm-hmm. And everybody's misled as to what's expected of them. What's your part in the universe? Well, it's occupying this pew and getting money and paying taxes, to support these really evil people that consider themselves as gods over the rest of you, like it's their choice as to who gets to live or die or get all the best property or the best food, the best education and everything. And it's a very evil paradigm. And they think this is good and this is what God dictated that they should be in, and they should pull their weight and raise new taxpayers. One day in every 4 you work goes to this paradigm. And what are they using it for? Are they fixing your roads with it? They doing a better job in your schools, giving you better health care? No, they're spending trillions of it on wars we shouldn't have anything to do with.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, we're murdering people with drones. We use a multi-million-dollar missile to kill a bunch of people in a $10 tent.
Right.
Uh, it's insane. It's beyond insane. It's sociopathic, psychopathic, and probably a whole host of really large, long names that require a lot of money and lots of, lots of therapy.
Right. That's so true. Well, and let's not forget the black technology too, of course, with the covert assault technology that they do. So yeah,
Exactly.
many tentacles on that one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was one of those, once upon a time, as an MK Ultra, as a first generation MK Ultra, when you see me in person, I was like, I'm only about 6'4" now, but I was 6'5". I'm about 240 pounds, big, tall, blonde, brawny, martial arts. I'm a killer. That's what they wanted me to be, and that's what they wanted me to stay be. Kill who they say to kill because they say to kill them, and I should believe them that these persons are worthy of death. And it's like I thought of myself for the longest time as a monster who was out killing other monsters. And my friend Laura used to say I used to have a Frankenstein's monster complex, and she was right. It took a long time to outgrow that. But during that time, uh, I learned to hate my handlers. When I was dealing with monsters, yes, a lot of warlords, a lot of drug lords, they were very, very evil people. But what I didn't understand exactly at the time, I mean, I had more than an inkling of other stuff they were doing. But what I didn't understand at the time, like especially the Central and South American forays, was, we thought when I went in and killed all these drug lords off that they were burning the drugs. And this was not the case. George H.W. Bush was the head of the CIA. They would wrap up, basically the drug lord built up his little kingdom out there. He paid the peasants to go into the jungles to harvest the cocoa leaves and then to process that into cocaine, which he sold or intended to sell in the United States and basically anybody else that wanted to pay the price for it. But what was happening with me at the time was they were sending me and a bunch of other ultras and DEA and NSA and all kinds of alphabet agencies down there. We'd kill off these drug lords. And now I believed at the time they were destroying the drugs. They'd just burn it all down with the processing thing. And it's like that was not the case. They were loading it onto CIA planes, bringing it into American airports without any customs or any of that whatsoever, and selling it on American streets. That came out 15 years after I left. And I mean, that's a fact. That's a truth. That's exactly what they did. They're doing it now with the heroin in Afghanistan. Those poppies produce over 94% of the heroin in the world, the opiates in the world.
Mm-hmm.
In the biggest and the most evil drug cartel in the world has complete control over it. Our soldiers are guarding those fields. Taliban didn't want anything to do with that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really wild. And when you talk about your first generation MK Ultra, for those of the listeners who might not be familiar with your background here, let's just give them a brief rundown as far as how you got pulled into the first generation MK Ultra. What recruited you? At what point did you get pulled in? And how did you break orbit with them?
Well, I kind of partially covered it in my little book, Matriarch of the Witch Clan, which is also in the book Rick's books there. Because I wasn't a girl, my mother was a single mom. My dad was obviously involved in the program somehow, but I didn't know that at the time. Um, uh, I never got a chance to meet him or vice versa. He was kept far away from me. All I heard about him were rumors. But because I wasn't a girl, well, they knew I was going to be an adept. All right. In our family, an adept witch is someone who's just born with all these necks, a bunch of little genetic switches that a lot of people don't have turned on. Mine are all turned on, or many of them are turned on. And so you got a better proclivity for a lot of things that people consider supernatural or paranormal. I don't particularly like those words because, see, it separates you. There's you who's natural, And then there's this other stuff that's supernatural, and it's not the truth. You are a part of it. There's a ghost out there. That's supernatural. You are a ghost in a meat suit. That's natural. And when you drop the meat suit, you're just like the ghost out there without the meat suit. Say you're the same thing. All right. You're not separate. That's the illusion. That's the thing that they put upon you. So anyway, they knew I was going to be an adept witch, but they were hoping that I'd be a female, and then I would be the next matriarch of our witch clan. You have to have an adept matriarch because only an adept is going to understand all these witches to be able to help rule them well, or choose the proper directions the clan should be going. Back then, this was not a public thing. This is the kind of thing that would bring you a lot of persecution. And so I kind of hats off to all the Wiccans who came along in the 1950s and took a more public stance and start really educating people as to what a witch was and what a witch wasn't. So I'm very, very beholding to the younger witches there, the Wiccans. And anyway, they put me up for adoption. Now, what they didn't understand was that I wasn't just going to a convent. I was among the first infants inducted into the MK Ultra programs in 1953. And I was, for the first 18 months of my life, I was experimented on, given just about every disease known to man, had my brain stem scarred to try to give me an eidetic memory. Now, they were not successful with most of the children they did this to. Most of them died, or worse, ended up where they could not do anything but live the rest of their life in an institution. And I've seen some of those places, and they're horrible. But that's what they were, the lucky ones died. But I survived. I was one of the survivor ones. They were going to make me into like a super soldier. They hardened my bones. They used electroshock to make my muscles denser and stronger. Essentially, I could take a jump from third or fourth floor easily, hit the ground in a roll and get up running. I could take a direct hit from a car 40 miles an hour and maybe limp away with a bruise, but you're not going to break my bones. These were things to make me survivable. An eidetic memory to help me remember all my lessons or remember things that I seen to, bring back when I was sent up on missions. We were meant to be survivable, come back and go out and do it again. My grandma got me back at about 18 months, but I still had to keep going back because I had medical problems. But not like you think, and not like she thought. They were lying to her. The program I was at, it's documented. You'll find a history thing about human experimentation. I was at a strong hospital in Rochester, New York, in Building 400. They've been using it since the 1940s for the Manhattan Project. Where people would come into the hospital, Strong Hospital. It was the biggest hospital in Rochester. It's the University of Rochester Medical Center. All the neurologists and psychologists and stuff study there to get their degrees. This is where human experimentation was done. They learned things there that they'd learn nowhere else from the same Nazi doctors that learned during World War II. In fact, up in Cobb's Hill in Rochester, New York, there used to be a POW camp where the Nazi doctors that they brought in from World War II were brought to these POW camps and processed there and given American identities and put into these other programs like Werner von Braun, Sidney Gottlieb, and a bunch of these other monsters that experimented on human beings in the concentration camps. People tell me today I get very upset, and it's not because I don't like Jews. I like a great many Jews. Not absolutely everyone. I don't love every one of everybody. But they'd say, remember the horrors they did at the Holocaust. And it's kind of like those exact same Nazi doctors that did those horrors to those Jews in those concentration camps, did those horrors to American children right here in the United States through the 50s, the 60s, even 70s. Like when Duncan came along, he's about 10 years down the road from me. He's a second generation. They did think, and more children died or worse than actually survived these things.
Right.
I was one of the survivors. Duncan was one of the survivors. There's a number of us. You'll hear about them. Yourself was one of those
Yep.
survivors.
Different
There was a
technology.
lot of people that didn't make it as far as you did, or in the shape you did, and for that we have to be nothing but thankful for that. But that was what I came up in, and I was a part of through the 50s, the 60s, most of the 70s. By about 78, I pretty much had all that I could handle of it, broke free. They did everything they can, still doing everything they can to make my life miserable as a targeted individual. I can't leave the country. I'm on a no-fly list, all kinds of stuff. Um, it doesn't end. It never ends.
Right.
But I'm way out in the sticks, up in the mountains now. So setting up a microwave to microwave my house or all that other kind of crap is not easy and feasible so much anymore. Everybody knows everybody up here and looks in on each other. And you see a strange van driving down the road. You'll find 5 or 6 neighbors talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And also, did you have a connection to the Montauk Project at all during that timeline?
Um, I was in and out of those places. I don't really remember much about them because by that time I was a very active ultra. I was in Project Talent and Project Search. I was doing remote viewing. That was by like the late 60s, 68, 69. Ingo Swann came around 70, 71. But they were already starting it because they knew the Russians were already doing it to the tune of about 60 million rubles a year. So they knew they had to kind of get on the stick with it. In my case, they took the martial arts, they took the conditioning that I survived and everything, and decided that they were going to this would make a super soldier. I really don't like the term, but someone that can basically track down somebody through the jungle anywhere they go. Once got a link, I can find them, I can feel them, I can, whatever they're dreaming or thinking about, I can feel it. And basically, I don't get no relief until they're dead. And I'll track them down and take them out. Zero collateral damage. It's better than these Hellfire missiles. I just get who I'm sent for, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe his cronies and his bodyguards, but that's it.
Right. And you mentioned was it Project Talent and Project Search?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, now there was like 150 thereabouts sub-programs all under the MK Ultra umbrella. There was MK Monarch, MK Naomi, MK, lots and lots of them. Now they were all different things that were basically, they were using the same technology, the same things they were learning, the hypnosis, the drugs, the mind control. In some cases, they were wiping kids' minds completely clean. I mean, completely blank. I believe they had intentions of using brainwaves to put they thought maybe they could put their own souls into those bodies of those children, when theirs got old and decrepit, and then they could be a young child all over again. And I don't believe that works like that.
No, I don't think so. But they do have the EEG cloning and heterodyning using the BrainNet
Right.
template. Yeah.
Right. That's what they had every intention of doing with a lot of those. So, they were using a lot of the same things. They made sex slaves. They made slaves that could just work embassies and gather information. Some of us, like me, I'm this big brawny guy. I could run real fast. In tournaments, I used to jump over my opponents, come down and hit them in the back as I'm coming down, punch them in the kidneys or in the spine or whatever. I could make a 6-foot leap from a standstill. Well, back then, I could step out a second floor building like you could step off your porch. It was, I mean, literally that easy. I hit on an average, this isn't my fastest, just on an average, 4 times a second, my call side was thumper, but I hit it 1,600 pounds per square inch.
Nice.
So it's like, look, a concrete blocking, people used to make fun when I do the demonstrations, big planks and bricks and stuff like that. And they'd say, well, that's all well and good if you ever get attacked by a gang of boards or bricks in a dark alley at night. And it's like, how thick is your skull?
Mm-hmm.
If I hit you only once and I hit you in the skull, I'm driving the bone fragments back into your brain. You're not getting up from that.
That's right.
So I could kill 4 people if they're within reach in 1 second. And that's the dark kind of things that I was literally born and bred for.
Right. And also, John, it's interesting because you've made such a transition. Now, how did you make the transition from rage to the being you are today? Obviously, you've done some internal work, but something shifted in your psyche that took your power back. But I think you always fought that programming, didn't you?
Yes, I always did, because a witch's power, my grandma used to always teach. Now, there's one set of eyes that looked over my cradle that I always knew loved me. I went through a lot of awful things, but there was one person who always loved me, and all she had to do was look disappointed in something I said or did, and it would break my heart. Okay, and I never lost that tenderness, and that was my grandma. And she taught me to be a real worthy witch. My aunts and stuff objected and everything. You just don't do that. They kind of treated me like I was a poisonous snake of some kind. Grandma treated me with a lot of love. So I did have that love. I did learn an unbroken will and word. I never, ever broke my promises. And incidentally, those two things work kind of hand in hand. You kind of got to have one to have the other.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to commit yourself to it. I mean, totally. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you gave your word, it's coming to pass, move in heaven or hell, or you'll die trying, literally. And that's what I became as an ultra. I couldn't be, you hear Duncan talk sometimes, and he had this mantra. I used to train him when he was younger. In his martial arts, he'd say failure's not an option. And it truly wasn't. They had horrible things if you did fail. You could end up like those broken children in the psych wards and the institutions. And believe me, you'd rather die. You really would. Dying would be a lot nicer. Mm-hmm. So, you everything was so trauma based and so intense. They didn't call us ultras for nothing. It was kind of like the grandmother that lifts the truck up off of her grandson, finds the strength because she's so freaked out, in trauma about her child being hurt or something like that. That's kind of how they trained us. That was the premise that gave us that, quote, superhuman strength. Well, there was more involved than that. They did everything they could scientifically to keep inducing this. And, like I say, I was one of the first generation of that group. Duncan's stronger than me, and I was pretty doggone strong. 500 or 600 pounds wasn't really a big problem for me. With Duncan, half a ton wasn't really a big problem with him. He could do that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the generations got, improved upon, so to speak, as they went. But the things my grandmother taught me, will and word, well, I come from generations of people that have very strong will and words. That's what makes a witch. People that don't have that kind of willpower never really make great witches. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, well, some people, the Gaelic word was Cowan. The word J.K. Rowling kind of coined was muggles, non-witches. Basically they, circumstances, stuff happens. Mm-hmm. And with the witch, it's like, I have the power to make stuff happen. That's what spellcraft is about. Spell being a period of time when an influence or influences are brought to bear to accomplish a desired goal. That's what a spell is, not, Webster's definition, a series of magic words that make stuff happen. It's like, no, It's not how it's, see how people get disconnected from it? They don't even think right about it. They don't, when you say the word, you think witches, especially this time of year, they're thinking green-faced hags with warts on their noses and eating all kinds of foul stuff and, cackling and ready to do evil. And it's like, no witch in their right mind would do evil. You get up trying to look for some good things to do so that good things come back at you.
Right.
If nothing else, people got all these bad ideas. But I mean, it was those things that influenced me, and they were always there, and they were always a part of me, in my soul, and a part of my choices, my active choices. Now, they found they had trouble. My first assignment outside as an active ultra was in Cambodia during the Vietnam War, when Richard Nixon was saying, we have no people in Laos and Cambodia. Well, I was one of the people that wasn't there. So was Dave Corso, so was Duncan, so was a number of us. We were on different missions. We weren't together at that time or anything. They had built the demilitarized zone, the DMZ in Vietnam, to separate North Vietnam from South Vietnam. And we stopped the Viet Cong from running the Ho Chi Minh Trail to, getting their supplies down there to their people in South Vietnam to carry the war to us. But we found out that they were going around the border through Cambodia and Laos and coming south around the DMZ. So, we couldn't go into those countries, and they could. So essentially, they put people like me, ninja style, in the woods and stuff. When the Viet Cong would come down the trail, and somebody'd get just a little bit separated from anybody else, where they weren't looking at them for a second or so, I might break their necks or fracture their skulls, drag them into the woods, and there's like one less. Now there's two less. Now there's three, and I'd follow them along through the jungle ninja style, and it really made the short hair stand up on the back of their necks. To deal with those woods is like being haunted. And then when they did find their compatriots, well, after I broke their necks, I turned their head around the other way so that their carotid arteries and their windpipe would twist and crimp shut. So, you can survive a broken neck, but you can't survive the broken neck and not getting the oxygen. So they can never speak of what they saw. Mm-hmm. So, we gave them all these horrors of devils in the jungle. And that was my job, plus teaching the Cambodian freedom fighters to fight the Khmer Rouge. And, they'd have bow and arrows and poison darts and stuff like that to get them. The Khmer Rouge were armed with AK-47s and stuff brought by Russia and China. So we taught them, well, look, any kind of weapons they come in with are yours. You just, I teach them how to lay back and catch them off guard. And, we got a couple AK-47s. We bring those back to the group. We'll get their ammunition. We'll get their supplies. And basically that's what I did. Now, at one point, I don't know what the heck was going on. I mean, they knew better. They absolutely knew better. They bombed a place. I was up near an area of Cambodia called Battambang. And I really love the Cambodian people. They got a very interesting history and a very peaceful history, incidentally. And this war was doing awful things to them, and it was unnecessarily awful. I just don't understand the full scope of why they get so evil. But they carpet bombed Battambang twice. It was American planes. It's like, why did you do this? That is a village of civilians. And you got people like me out there. I mean, I wasn't the only one. But, it's like we're dealing with the Khmer. Why are you doing that? Why are you, we got zero collateral damage. The people I'm killing are soldiers. That's what they're in this thing for. So I start raising a fit. Look, if you guys are going to do stupid and start killing a bunch of innocent people, I stop right here and now. And it's like, whoa, we got a lot invested in you. All right. You're an asset. That's a politically correct term for property. Mm-hmm. We own you. Okay. So unless you want to end up with more experiments on, we got all this money, invested in you to make you this kind of person. You got to start bringing some of that home, maybe train some other ultras for a while. And that's how I met Duncan. And, Duncan was trained for something kind of different. And I gave him a little bit more and, martial arts. I wasn't his only teacher, but I was one of his major teachers and a bunch of others that way. And then they says, well, we got these other things opening up where like these drug lords and warlords here and there, and it's kind of like if you do missions with these, here's the file on this guy and here's the file on that guy. And I want to mention names, something awful, but if I do, I'm going to put myself in danger
Right. No, no worries. That's all good. No.
yeah, yeah. I'd love to, but I can't. And they said, well, what about these guys? I didn't have a hard time, taking them out, putting them in a prison. They just kind of run their business from the prison. It's been done. We've seen it before. We've seen it for decades. And it's kind of the only good thing you can do for the people there is to go in and kill this person. That's the only option that's going to make the world any better. And it's like, okay, I could sleep at night with that. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a conscience. And as long as I know that I'm doing something to make somebody's life right or better, I'm good with that. So I was doing those for a good while. They'd say, well, how about Angola? No, there's too much about Angola I don't like. How about this in Nicaragua? I got questions about that. I don't believe in killing a person just because they might have communist tendencies. I didn't particularly like communists, but I got to be honest with you. I don't like Democrats or Republicans either, and for all the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I don't see as one being, worthy of a death sentence for anybody. So, I would be problematic. They didn't have me completely controlled. As long as they could convince me that I was doing the right thing, I could go down there and I could do these things. And I mean, I would, charge the gates of hell with a squirt pistol, and get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I want to charge the gates of hell and take my handlers and throw them over those gates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't blame you.
And that's kind of how I got after a while. When they start putting more and more pressure and I start resisting, and then basically their true colors, and their true colors were always there, but just not totally apparent. There's that part of me in denial that, it's for the best of the country and to keep the communist threat and freedom and all that other kind of stuff. And I didn't see anybody in Vietnam any freer or free because of us, or the those of us that came back among the veterans that life was any better. In fact, people are going to jail for lifetime for marijuana possessions, and it's kind of exactly in a free country, who has the right to tell you what plants you can smoke and what one you can't?
Mm-hmm.
Or why you should go to jail or lose your property, or there's a whole lot of questions I had. And freedom wasn't really entering into it. In fact, almost every year of my life, I've seen less and less freedom, or more and more of it gets taken away. And it doesn't have anything to do with communists over there or anything else. It has to do with people here in power, So I hated it. I hated them. I hated what they did. I hated what they did to the other children. I start waking up to it and seeing more of it. They'd talk, and I'd be quiet. It's like Nietzsche says, be careful when you stare at, into the darkness of the pit, the pit staring back at you. Well, I was in the pit, in the darkness, and I was staring back. And while they were studying me, I was studying them. And I learned some tricks. They would teach me, I learned to speak Russian through sleep teaching. They put these pillow speakers. I mean, I knew what they were doing. Sometimes they'd use drugs and hypnosis and video and sound to program me for different things. And sometimes I lost memories that way. Memories got covered up.
Right.
And eventually, over the years, some of those would come back. You'd have the PTSD, you'd have the flashback, the dreams. And they're so vivid and they're so strong, and it's kind of like you remember all of it, and it comes back. You thought you were visiting. I remember when Duncan said he thought he was visiting an uncle for the summer, and it's kind of like I had a few memories like that too, and some I knew I wasn't visiting an uncle for the summer, and sometimes I was, and sometimes I don't know, maybe I was or maybe I wasn't. These people were very crafty with what they do. But if there was any kind of really horrible thing that went on, eventually I remembered it. The screen memories broke down over time. PTSD, you don't ever get rid of that. Those soldiers that come back that seen those awful things, they see them just as vividly 20 years from now as they did the day they happened. They can smell it, they can hear it, they can feel it, all of that. It doesn't go away. It's like somebody spiked their voltage and now it's permanently burned onto their hard drive, and it'll never go away. It can never be erased. And so, I mean, some of those memories come back and over that time, and I hated them. And in fact, I threatened to kill them, and they sent a couple spooks to lean on me. And when they drew their weapons, didn't work out so good for them. For a person that doesn't need a gun, see, they figure just because you're unarmed, they don't understand. If you're close enough to touch, I can fracture your brain, your skull like a brick, and there's no getting up from it. And there they are laying there in South American country and full CIA information and stuff on them. And it's like, okay, what's the spooks doing down here operating in our country? This made a diplomatic problem. So over time, they learned it was better off to just kind of leave me some space. But then they don't leave you alone. You get working in a place and think you're going to live a normal life, and by the time you're in a place 5 years, you're getting vested into the company. You get a 401k program. Somebody comes along and tells them, hey, this guy's a Vietnam veteran and he killed more guys than cancer, and if he has flashbacks, no matter how fast the police come, he's going to kill a lot of you before they get there. And then I'd be out wondering what the heck, I'm laid off and I'm out pounding the pavement for another job again. And in all of that time, I never held a job for longer than 5 years, no matter how hard I tried. It made really rough on my marriage and raising my kids because I was always starting from square one, and sometimes I'd have to take less pay just to have something coming in. It's a hard life, but I'm committed. I'm committed to it. Will and word, I will not break it. I swore that I would defend and protect the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I meant it when I gave that promise, and I never, ever break my promise. So there's no time limit on that. So even now, basically, I spend what's left of my life trying to wake people up as best I can about who the enemy really is, who the enemies of freedom really is.
No, I agree with you on that. It's you've had an incredible life, John. I mean, we're just getting into the very we're just touching the surface on this, obviously. So we are going to head for a break, everybody. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back here at the Dark Matter Digital Network. This is Hyperspace. I'm Solaris BlueRaven. My special guest is John Stormm. Welcome back, everybody, to the Dark Matter Digital Network. This is Hyperspace. I'm Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my special guest, John Stormm. And John, you with me?
Yes, I am.
All right. Yeah, that's a little heavy material there, but we did need to go through that a little bit and touch base insofar as where you been, because it's incredible and very traumatic on so many different levels. And I know for a lot of people, they probably think it sounds like something from a movie. Literally, you could write a story about your life and put it on film.
Oh,
you know what I mean? It's just
it wouldn't be a movie.
I know, but it's almost surreal. It's just the whole idea behind it is just, and I don't even know what to say because it's really intense.
The places that I've talked about are documented. I mean, like I said, they did during the 40s and 50s. They had done. People would come into Strong Hospital for, hey, I got a flu or need a flu shot, and they'd inject them with plutonium isotope and stuff like that, just to see what it would do without their knowledge, without their consent. And horrible things happen to these people. These people that do these things, that are part of these projects, there's not an ounce of humanity in them, not an ounce of compassion whatsoever, not a little bit. Right? They did it to children. Like I say, when they talk to me about the Jewish Holocaust and everything like that, it's like, Look, they knew better. They were hanging Nazis like they were Christmas tree ornaments. And over here, they all got away scot-free. In fact, they got high-paying jobs.
Mm-hmm. You bet they did. Yeah, all those projects went black, but yet they recruited so many people for
Right.
torturous avenues.
Building 400 still exists. It's still there. People drive by it every day. It's on a major thoroughfare in Rochester, in the city. People drive by it every day. Now, if you wanted to knock on the door there, they wouldn't let you in because it is CIA run. It is a CIA office, and for reasons of national security, namely covering up. In '73, Richard Helms had all of our records, our personal records, destroyed. Just so if you had that information or I had that information and those people were still alive, they would serve multiple life sentences for the things they did to American children in that place in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Out of that place came Dr. George Estabrooks from Colgate, Rochester. He was the one that told the Senate committee that he could hypnotize anyone in that room, not only to go home and kill their parents, but to eat them in a stew.
Jeez.
And he was part of that program. This is the kind of monsters that were, that you call them doctors. People look up to their doctors. Well, the doctor says I have to have this measles vaccination. They know what's best for me. It's like, don't you believe it?
Mm-hmm. I so agree with you. Yeah, it's gotten out of control. There's no doubt about it. And of course, now we have the high-tech technology to a point where they can do all that through satellite-driven technology, through psychotronic warfare and induction and artificial telepathy. And the program continues, and the insidious things happen.
Right. They've been getting away with that since the end of World War II, since before I was a baby, during my childhood and everything. And that technology has advanced. I'm 62 years old now. And imagine what they've learned doing things that you just can't pick up in any other university.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You'd have to study from a book, or you can't, well, this shampoo doesn't allow animal testing. It's like, yeah, but we got all this stuff that does human testing, whether we like it or not. And it's like, well, if you said anything or if they didn't want you to know, they'd say, well, it's covered by national security, but they're committing crimes. They're committing horrible crimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people.
And some of them just totally unnecessary, in fact. I mean, by any standard.
Well, it's a sabotage. There's no doubt about it. And of course, I think it's more of an epidemic, but not really addressed, John. It's just not addressed. I mean, there are beings like us who are doing it, but not very many. And
Yeah.
I suspect
I
at some
kind
point
of consider myself a little bit of the voice of those children that never could or never can or never will ever be able to speak out about what happened to them.
right.
And like I say, it is documented. A lot of it is. You don't know the half of it, but it is documented. There's over 1,000 pages of a Freedom of Information Act on MK Ultra, and they had a hearing in '77 and another one in '95. They said, "Well, we're not doing it anymore." They said they quit it since like 1970, but that's not the truth because I was an active Ultra myself until '78. And I put the brakes on what I was doing, not them. They're still going.
Yep, they're doing it with technology through the artificial telepathy satellite-driven program, psychotronic warfare. Yep,
Yeah,
that's where it's
I've seen
going.
some of the results of that.
Yeah,
I've even got if you get on my Facebook page, I got a whole section in my photo albums of my MRIs. You want to talk about some crazy implants?
right.
It's like, where did they get the technology to do this kind of stuff? Yeah, I got my MRIs on there. You could see stuff in there that is impossible if you believe modern medicine now. Impossible to do to get things that deep into your brain without killing you. And I'm loaded with it.
I saw. Yeah.
It's incredible. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't saw it myself. In fact, they lied to I wanted it. Those MRIs were taken for my disability case. They lied to the judge. They lied to my lawyers about it. And I had to go in physically and dominate the receptionist and then the nurse to give me the CD-ROM, the hospital CD-ROM of my MRIs.
Yeah, that's huge. And of course, if people
Yeah.
want to access that, that's on your website, but it's on your actually to your Facebook page, right?
It's right on my Facebook
Yeah.
page. Just go to my photos. If you're a friend, I will allow most just anybody, even if I don't know you, to be a friend because there's people that read my books and stuff like that. So chances are I don't know you, but you put in a friend request, I'll okay it. You start doing weird stuff or start acting like a shill, I'll block you so quick, you won't know what happened. But if you want to get on there and you actually want to see this stuff or look it over for yourself, I got hundreds and hundreds of pictures and MRIs and everything else of all things about the craft, things about ultras, things about martial arts. I'm very open as much as I can. I try to put out as much as I can to help validate. I know it's hard to believe just off the cuff, but when you're exposed as long as I have been to these things, there's just some things that are just kind of undeniable.
Oh, yeah. No, there's a paper trail beyond words. I mean, there's so many people that have been inducted into different kinds of programs. And of course, John, like I said, it's a miracle you got out as well as you did. And where you are now on the timeline and consciousness. And of course, you reflect on some things and it seems really harsh, but I know you because I've interviewed you several times over and on and off
Yeah.
air. And I know what kind of being you are deep down, and you are a good soul. So knowing, and for people out there who have been pulled into just insidious programs, who go through the trauma and think they're monsters because of their handlers, this is an awakening to them that they can break free of these programs and they can deprogram
Oh, that's
themselves.
true. That's true. And for those of you out there who are there or you think you might be, let me share something with you. I know this from experience. Okay, so I can say this with all authority. Um, the fact that you think you're a monster, that you think this is horrible. See, the people that are doing this, the handlers, they don't think they're monsters. They think we're the CIA, we're the good guys. All right. They don't think they're monsters at all. But just the fact that you think there's something horrible about what you are or what you're doing says something good about you inside. There's a part of you inside. My grandma used to say there were stories that went about me when I was young. There were stories about my father not being entirely human. And it might be something to do with some of the programs, and it's really hard to say. I got I never got a chance to meet him. I couldn't go back and talk to him and, look him over for myself or argue with him or anything else. There was nothing I could do about that. So, I mean, it's kind of like anything goes as to what the truth, but people would say that I was not entirely human. And the truth is none of us are as much human as we like to think we really are.
Mm-hmm.
There's more to it than that, and that would take dozens of shows to cover. But the truth is, Grandma said that, people would say somebody like me could never be saved. Jesus would never love anybody like me or anything like that. And it's kind of like, to a certain point, I kind of had to agree. But to another certain point, Grandma taught me something that didn't quite, it's not like the thing blossomed on me and I was enlightened all at once. It took years for it to sink in and before the light really went on for me. She says, essentially, life is about choices. It's not who you are or what you were born that defines you, whether you were poor or rich, white or black or Asian or Indian or whatever. That's not what defines you. It's your choices that define you. When I got older and actually start reading about Jesus for myself, I didn't like Christians, and I'm still not crazy about the religion as a whole. People I take on an individual basis, whatever they are. But what Jesus taught also kind of says, talking about things being from the inside coming out. It's not what a man takes into himself that defiles him, but what comes out of him. And so it's kind of from the inside out. It's what you choose to do, you do. You manifest it in this physical world.
Mm-hmm.
It's in your soul. You are a soul. Your body is just your body. It's just a physical body. It's just, looking for your consciousness in your brain is like taking your radio apart to find a radio announcer. It doesn't exist there. He doesn't exist there. You are your soul. And because your soul objects and is so horrified by this says that you're not that kind of soul like they are,
Mm-hmm.
like your handlers, like the people smearing that crap on you and telling you it's yours. So I mean, bit by bit, you learn when I have my choice, when I'm able to make my own choice, I'd rather make other choices. This is not the man or woman I want to be. I don't like this. I object to this. And it's like, okay, now you're understanding who you are. Run with it. Run away with if you have to. Fight if you have to. Do whatever you have, but that is you. That is your soul. Latch onto it. Face it head on. There's going to be things you like about your soul and things you don't, but you're going to have to embrace them and learn how to deal with them and to focus them in a direction that you be the man or woman that you want to be. You got to develop into it. You don't go into it overnight, but your proclivities are already there. They're kind of buried under all their crap and their programming, but it's still there.
It certainly
you
is.
can still be you. In my case, I think I got the added benefit of being an ultra because I got to do things for people that other people couldn't do for them. Because of the training and the conditioning I had, I could pretty much laugh at a gang fight. And in the city of Rochester and the city courts there, I've been in there plenty of times. I mean, I've lived there most of my life. I mean, I am an ultra, and I always have been. And I did things that just normal people don't do. Now, this isn't to say that all of you can do them. You might be in a condition for this, that, or the other thing. They kind of try to find their own uses for you. You're an asset, you're property. It's time for you to break free, to be the person you want to be, not what they want you to be, but learn to think for yourself, to learn for yourself, and become that person. I'm the best me that I can be right now. And it's like, look, I'm not perfect. But as far as my understanding of what the Bible says, what Jesus says, what God wants us to be as a father and being a father myself and a grandfather, all I have to be is better today than I was yesterday. A little bit. Don't get overwhelmed with the whole journey in that because it's not going to happen overnight. I'm still on that journey over 40 years later. Still walking that path. It was difficult, but worth every step. There's a saying, sometimes pain is the only bridge that'll take us to where we want to go. And, turning against my masters and against the United States government and all their pressures and everything, that's been painful. But I also learned as a warrior my whole life, pain is inevitable. You're going to get hurt no matter what. That's life. But suffering is optional. When you feel you're doing the right thing and you get hurt doing the right thing for the right reason, it feels good. Right. Sounds kind of sick, but it's true.
Oh, it makes sense right there. And, you touched on the martial arts too. And of course, you and I both have a martial arts background. I think it's funny because, instead of having one weapon, which most people carry with them when they're packing a firearm, we have 5. I mentioned 4 before, but you said the head. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yep. So literally,
there's more than that. When you recognize your pinnacle and you understand that 5th element being your spirit. Now, with my spirit, I can dominate people. People in the same room. If I'm feeling something strongly, they feel it. If I'm a bit afraid or upset, they're afraid and upset. They might not understand why, but they'll feel it strongly. When I went to get my MRI records, they didn't want to give them up to the judge. They denied that they even had them, but I was there. I knew. And it's like when I said I wanted them, I got them. They couldn't resist me, especially as close as I was and, 6'4" and looming over them and just keeping that psychic pressure on them. It's like they got me what I wanted. I walked out. Do I owe you any money for this? No, you already paid for them. Good.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we touched also on the belief systems, and it's true that the belief systems become one's personal haunt in the afterlife. So I can only suggest that people who live these vicious lives, like these handlers, controllers, programmers, they're so toxic and noxious on so many different levels of their belief systems and programmed that when they transfer out, that's all they'll be surrounded by. To me, it would seem like that kind of a maelstrom.
Well, it's true. You got to remember the adage, knowledge is power. That is a universal truth. It doesn't matter who you are, not, or what you believe in. Knowledge is power. Now, that being said, you got to understand the antithesis of that. Bad knowledge is power for somebody else. And when they feed you things like, all right, let's talk about your soul. Are we going to get religious? No, I'm going to get factual. I'm going to get scientific and realistic about it. Um, Knowledge is power. Bad knowledge is power for somebody else. If you feel, they say in the Bible, it says, what is it? There's only one mediator between God and man, and that is the man Christ Jesus. Now, however, having said that, they set up this cross and this altar, and there's an imagery there. This is programming. Okay, there's an imagery there. We're hardwired for certain symbolism to mean certain things, to ring certain bells on our internal, programming chips there, in our brain. Just like in martial arts, when the repetition puts those moves into your reptilian brain, so you do them faster, and the minute a punch is coming towards your face, you don't even have to think about it. Like Bruce Lee said, it hits all by itself. That's programming the reptilian brain. Well, when people get religious, they also program their reptilian brain for certain other things. Sometimes they're wrong things. It gives power to whom? Power to the person standing up, exalted on a podium between you and that cross and that altar. That is the person you feel you got to talk to. And when you want to talk to God, you can't talk to him in your bathroom or in your bedroom as well as you can talk to him inside a stained glass box with a pastor or a preacher or a priest present. All witches are priests or priestesses, but we practice a bit differently than these warlock priests. They stand exalted between you and your God. We stand in circles. Mm-hmm. In a circle, there is no hierarchy. There is no high or low or better or lesser. You're there by mutual consent. Everybody's equal in a circle. That's not how they do things in a church. And the symbolism is there. You want to talk to God or understand God? Only the priest does. You go to him, he goes to God, he comes back to you and tells you what God wants. God wants your money. God wants you to leave your property to him when you die. Not to your children, to him. God wants you to go ahead and forgive that priest that sexually abused your son, the altar boy there, and let him go do the same thing in another church somewhere. It's so perverted, it's so twisted, but people believe it. Mm-hmm. I understand it because that was what it was for me. I saw what happened to those children when I was a child. And it's like somehow their authority, I couldn't tell people. I mean, I tried to tell people, but he's got a vivid imagination and all this other kind of crap. And it's like I couldn't get around that. And it's like I saw how evil they were, but it didn't register because that was supposed to be the right way. And I didn't understand because these guys got PhDs and I'm just a lowly little kid. And it's like, look, I graduated not the top of my class, but the top of my school. They gave me the low end of my IQ was measured at 160, the high end at 210. That thing they did with the scarring the brainstem did give me an eidetic memory. I could, if you gave me a test today on anything that I learned in school, I would still score in the high 90s. Mm-hmm. I don't forget. And I don't forget what I saw and what I experienced. And it's like after a while, I may not have understood, but I understand now.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you were talking about the symbolism also. There's a real misperception with pentagrams and pentacles. And of course, we can dive into the aspect of, during this time of year, especially with Samhain, people assume that there's satanic ritual versus just regular celebration of Samhain.
Yeah, for most Christians, just about anything they don't understand is of the devil. You could pretty much take it across the board with most of the sects of Christianity. If they don't understand it, it's of the devil. Always of the devil. And you gotta wonder, their devil must have created more than the creator because they don't understand so much. And in the end, you gotta wonder who they're really worshiping. And it's very, very true. You got to go back and look at that, and you got to ask that question. Your priest, your pastor says you should bring in Jesus taught that when you saw a beggar or you saw a person, you didn't turn the Good Samaritan saw somebody beaten and left for dead on the road, and he picks them up, and he gives these wonderful lessons, object lessons. But people, they look at a bum or a homeless person on the street. Well, he's probably going to spend it for booze or drugs. But I gave my money in the offering plate, this nice little gold plate or basket they pass around in Sunday. I gave at the office. I gave in church. I don't have to exercise empathy or compassion to these people out there. They're probably going to spend it on booze or drugs. And it's kind of like, well, think about that again, too. This person, if you empathized with him and you could feel what he's feeling, the fear that they're going through, sleeping under a bridge or in a box in an alley somewhere, the people that come upon them, the rats, the gangsters, the teenagers, the people just looking for someone to torture, the fear that they live with every night. If they went out and they bought a little bag of grass and it calmed them down for the night and they got a good night's sleep, God bless them.
Mm-hmm.
Even in Proverbs, Solomon wrote, don't worry about giving wine to somebody who's ready to die. Don't deny them that. It's kind of like, if that's what they do and that's what makes their day or their night just a little bit better, that's a good thing. It's not a matter of human laws. These humans make up all kinds of laws for things they have no right to make laws about.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
And people make judgments. Christ said, judge not, lest ye be judged. For the measure of judgment you mete out to others, that kind of judgment will be met out to you. And that's what some of these souls are finding. They were so critical because this person never came to their church or sat down in their pew and learned their version of Christian love. Yeah, Christian love, giving blankets laden of smallpox to Indians that were nice to you. That's okay. It's pretty twisted. Exactly what God are they worshiping? You find out as a Mason by the time you get up to 29, 30, 30, 30 to 33. And I got to tell you, as far as mages go, for some mages, for some of us out there, 33rd degree is barely out of junior high. Okay. But around 29th degree, they understand that when they talk about Adonai or Lord, they're not talking about Jesus or God as you know him. They're talking about Lucifer. And you'll find that in the writings of Albert Pike. All right. That's a fact. It's not little conspiracy theory or anything else. It's a fact. You can look it up yourself. And that's the God of this world. That's the God. They don't say his name like that. They misrepresent him. But these people think that these are godly men and these are people that you should follow and give your authority to and subject your mind to. And then you wonder why the world's so twisted. Well, how can there be a God if he allows all this on the world? And it's kind of like, you chose it. You give them money to do more all the time. In your taxes, in your offerings, and everything else. You got to learn to think for yourself. You got to take your power back. Knowledge is power. Get the knowledge. Don't trust them to give it to you, because bad knowledge is power they use against you. If they told me somebody was a particularly evil, show me a decent file, that person could have been a saint for all the heck I knew. In some cases, when I tune in, I know what they are, and basically I can't sleep at night dreaming the dreams they dream. But that goes over after I kill him as an MK Ultra. It's a very dark thing, but that's what I had to come through.
It's a maelstrom.
But I also learned. We all make mistakes. That's part of it. Getting up again, getting cleaned off, and going in the direction you know is a little more right. All you got to do today is be a little better of a person than you were yesterday. And tomorrow, that'll take care of itself because you'll get up with the same attitude.
Right. And
You
John,
have eternity to become like God.
right. I wanted to ask you real quick about the Lucifer because I think that's important to touch on that. Now, the difference between Satanism and Lucifer. Let's just start with there. Where does Lucifer in your research and history come in?
Actually, I take Lucifer. Well, there was a much older religion once upon a time. Back when there was any place that had a university or had a library, they had a university because they had curriculum. All right. This is a very old thing. You know, it wasn't just Ben Franklin that invented the library. There was a library at Alexandria. We have an adage, publish or perish. And, mages and sages from all over the world would come to the library. If you wanted the book to own, you had to pay the scribes to copy it out for you. You couldn't take it out, but you could study it there. And while you were there, they encouraged you to write down what you knew on this topic or that, and you would be remembered for posterity. Now, there came a time around Constantine's time when they start destroying these libraries, because they're the repository of all the world's knowledge and wisdom, and it was considerably more than you're led to believe these days. You got things like the Piri Rice maps and that kind of prove what I'm saying. Well, before the Luciferians, long before Christianity or Judeo-Christianity became known, there was a group called the Prometheans. Now, Prometheus, he was this guy that brought down the knowledge from the gods, or fire from the gods, from Olympus, and of course, Zeus being mad at him, he kind of chained him to a big rock, and this eagle would come down and eat out his liver every day, and terrible things would happen. But Prometheus is the hero. He brought this forbidden knowledge to people. Now, the Luciferians believe it's the same thing, just different names. Lucifer brought down this forbidden knowledge from God, taught us all the craft and all that kind of stuff. And God, not wanting us to have fun, being a cranky old white man sitting on a throne and very petty and everything like that, made Lucifer into the bad guy. And of course, even Pike in his writings writes that basically Lucifer's the good guy, God's the bad guy. All right. Essentially they got their little twisted things. Now, Christianity did not come down top down or from preachers in the masses leading them to the Lord and then building these mighty cathedrals. No, it came top down through the nobles, through the rich people with the power and the authority. So did Luciferianism. It wasn't something brought up by the peasants. Even Madame Blavatsky says she learned about Luciferianism from the French court. All right, and they would do evil things. Now, Satanism is a little more the rabid version of Luciferianism, but they're both, one's kind of psychopathic and the other one's sociopathic. Mm-hmm. Neither one of them's good. Now, biblically speaking, I did get my doctorate in theology, and I did make a big study of the Old Testament, New Testament, and even a lot of scriptures that weren't even allowed to be canonized as biblical. And one was the most quoted prophets of Old and New Testament was Enoch. But notice none of his books got canonized, and there's only a little bit of it left. So I'll bet the Vatican has a full version of it somewhere. Mm-hmm. But Enoch talks about Satan's, and he doesn't use a capital S, and basically he had about 200 of them. All right, Satan was not a single individual. It was a rebellion, and people that were forcing their own agenda. Essentially, his writings very much kind of coincide with the Sumerian writings about the Anunnaki building the slave race. They did bring technology and knowledge and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't necessarily for the betterment of man. It was to use man, enslave man, to make themselves better, to give themselves more power and more resources. And that was pretty much the same fact of these Satans or these fallen angels, these watchers that kind of taught so many crafts to certain women and stuff that they cohabited with, that they chose for themselves out of these creatures they helped make, they helped develop. Cro-Magnon is not is not a natural evolved creature on this planet. He is a combination of something else and the local hominids. Now, there's many different races here on Earth, but there's a certain kind of hominid on every continent except for Antarctica that we know of. In the United States, there's Bigfoot, Sasquatch. In Asia, there's the Yeti. There's the Almas in the Caucasus Mountains. There's the Ogaglis in Southeast Asia. I believe these Anunnaki or these spacefaring people gone and interbred or genetically manipulated themselves with the hominids local to the areas that they wanted to mine or use to create Cro-Magnon human beings. And that kind of showed up overnight. There is no missing link. There'd have to be about 30 some odd missing links to account for all the physical changes between Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon. Mm-hmm. But there are creatures that still look like Neanderthals today, and they're called Almas. And there are facts about the turn of the last century of them have a certain Russian village having captured an Alma, and even the guys in the town kind of having sex with it. They trained her, in those villages, an extra set of hands was very, very needed. And, they trained her to carry wood and be fed and she did have children, and some of those children speak. And Lloyd Pye did a really good study on that. And there's pictures in that, even dug up a skull of one of her sons, and it looks like a Neanderthal skull. The brow ridges and all that, and the occipital bun in the back of the head. And I mean, it's kind of like, they say, well, we're not exactly genetically identical to the Neanderthal. And it's like, no, I guess we're not. We've been changed. We're something else. Mm-hmm. And what creature evolves a brain that you only use about 10, 15% of? Evolves an organ that you don't use all of. The chimpanzees use all their brain. The dolphins use all their brain, but a human being does not. And in fact, in our school system, they try to train you to be more left-brained to the exclusion of your right brain. If you show a creative streak or a musical streak or artistic streak, they try to curtail that a bit. They want you, you got to get a regular job that you can pay taxes. You don't want to be a starving artist, and maybe you can do the artwork or the music as a hobby unless you make it big for some odd reason. But they always try to curtail that. They want you all to be left-brained. So basically, they can give you the rules, and 1 day in 4 that you work, they get the money for. And do they represent you? You really want to kill all those innocent people in Pakistan and Yemen, and they come home and their turbans wrapped, and somebody sits with a joystick in a little bunker in Langley and decides, without a trial, without any evidence presented, this might be a terrorist or someone who doesn't like Americans. Kill him, and his family's considered collateral damage. That's okay with you?
Right.
That's what happens when we give up our power. I am advocating everybody take their power back. When I wrote Practical Witchery and everything, it's to give knowledge is power. I'm trying to open people's eyes up to certain things about our government, and not just our government, the whole world, and learn to be your own master and to master yourself. And that should be everybody's particular goals in life. It's not selfish, because we learned that other people are just like us. We all fit. We all belong in this universe. And when you look into what is that? In Lakesh, they say, when I'm looking at you, I'm looking at myself. Mm-hmm. And you understand that, well, the last thing you want to do is kill him.
Right.
I understand why I'm not a killer no more.
It makes sense. Well, that was all.
Absolutely have to be.
Right. And of course, that was programming too. And we touched base on stepping up into the frequency of what's coming in. And I think that's a really big deal, is raising our frequencies to step up into the next dimensional space of where we're supposed to be as a race, to join the galactic.
But if you think you're a kitchen toaster and not a CB radio, how would you know to raise your frequency?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So as a human being, if you're what they program you to be, when you start understanding yourself, you find your own frequency. Okay, now you can raise it. But you can't raise it sitting there trying to find good fuzzy feelings by putting more in the offering plate and staring longingly at the stained glass windows. No, you got to get out and look at the world for what it really is
Mm-hmm.
and accept it as it really is and change. Once you accept it as you realize, you know what you can change and what you can't, or what needs changing.
Right. Take off the lens and the distortion for sure.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Get rid of the stained glass spectacles, and now you start seeing clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge is power. You'll learn from everything you see. And as you learn, like I did, I learned how to do sleep teaching to program myself to get rid of some of the things. I learned how to speak Russian. I learned how to take that sleep teaching and get certain thoughts and certain blocks out of my head, so that I could do more on my own, without them.
Right. Yeah. Well, you have to heal. There's no doubt about it. Whenever you have trauma-based mind control ritual, there has to be a healing involved because there's cellular memory, cellular
Yep.
recall, and as you said before, all these screen memories tend to break down, and as that happens, I'm sure other things start to spike up.
Oh, big time.
Mm-hmm.
And the anxiety and that, it's rough going through it. It is a trial by fire all by itself. You're alone. You can get suicidal. I learned probably before that time, I had a saying. I think it was an Apache shaman that gave it. Don't make permanent solutions to temporary problems. For one, that taught me not to kill. Just because somebody's having a bad day and they're a bit of a idiot, don't kill them for it. Okay. If they're gonna kill, well, if somebody's got to die, karma dictates that's the person that should die, not you. You won't get to do another good thing as long as you live, and they'll be running free to do more evil. And you wonder why the evil's a bad place. Evil prevails when good men do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're seeing. Everybody believes they don't have the authority to do anything. Those are the guys with the authority, and the guys with the authority are doing more and more evil. The next thing was all right. Don't make permanent solutions to temporary problems. I feel this pain. I feel this anxiety. I can't live with it. And see, the fact is, you are a soul. And when you drop this carcass, you put a bullet in your head, all that pain you're feeling, not the physical pain, the things that make you not want to live another day. Well, the fact is, you're going to live forever. And that is the pain you take with you. All right. Unless you work your way through that, you're going to take that with you forever, or at least for a very, very long time, unless somebody like me happens to come along, finds your haunt, recognizes you for what you are, and tells you what you need to know to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that don't always happen, sadly. Most of the paranormal investigators around here come out and tell me your name. And it's kind of like getting them to do circus tricks. Wow, I just proved that people exist after death. It's kind of like, no kidding, but what did you do for them? And then you walked away feeling all grand about yourself, and you left that soul wandering through that house.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
Good point, John.
yeah, I have a hard time with that.
Well, it's true. There's a sensationalism about that whole thing. Not with everybody, but with quite a few.
Well, it's good to learn, it's good to study, but there's a certain responsibility of the knowledge that you get from it. You understand that, you understand you're a soul, you understand they're a soul. Okay, now that you've established that, have you reached out to that soul for something a little bit longer than just a few minutes or whatever? You make some impact on it. See, you don't have the right to change anybody, but we as social creatures do have the duty and the responsibility to influence the circle of souls that we reach and we touch. So, we try to do it for the better. If you're having a bad day, well, try to keep it to yourself a little bit, because it's not going to do anybody any good if you inflict your bad day upon them.
Mm-hmm.
So, even learning all of that, not to take my own life. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. In fact, it's a temporary problem. Now, I had some deep, dark, temporary problems that went on for over a decade or so, or two. and I work through them day by day, each day just a little bit better than the day before. It's still a hard day. It's still rough. It still requires will, but I'm a witch. Will and word are unbroken. They are ironbound.
Hmm.
You don't get strong looking at a dumbbell. You have to pick it up and work it. You got to sweat. You got to hurt. No pain, no gain. The same with your will and your soul. Your spirit becomes stronger. You flex your muscles, but have you ever learned to flex your spirit? And that makes all that that's the fifth point on the pinnacle,
Right.
right? Fire, water, air, earth, spirit.
Hmm.
Utilize it. You'll see pictures of me handling flame and stuff, and that's no Photoshop. That's that's real. It's what a witch. A lot of things. It's just being wise is what a witch means.
Yep.
Being wise to that. You don't have to. Somebody doesn't have to declare you to be a witch or initiate you into this, that, or the other thing. You just need to understand and learn and keep learning, and understanding that you got an eternity to learn everything there is to learn,
Right.
and take joy in it. The more knowledge that you get, the more power you have, the bigger you grow. That's always been true, even in this lifetime. And next one, it's not a next one, it's a continuation of this one,
Right.
like the caterpillar to the butterfly.
Yep. Absolutely, it is. And John, I wanted to touch base because we are getting ready. Well, we have a little bit of time in the illusion of. I wanted to kind of give everybody a rundown on your practical witchery as far as what they can expect to read. And what's really wonderful about this book is that it's a free download on Bookrix, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to keep it that way. Knowledge is power. And, there is, witches believe what they call the law of three or the law of karmic returns. It's got a lot of names, and actually every major religion has some variation on that theme. But everything you do, be it good or bad, returns on you threefold. Now, people believe that money is everything in this world, and the fact is what you're spending as money now isn't really worth anything. In fact, it's a talisman designed to capture your soul, and it does. People, go to some place, flash a bunch of bucks, and every gal in the place is going to be your friend, or every guy in the place is going to be your friend. Tell them that you mop floors at Walmart and see how many people want to know you. But it really isn't who you are, and it really doesn't define who you are. People allow it to, but it's artificial, and it's very false. All right, so people will tell you, you got to rise above money, and there's some things that are far more valuable. Money gets taxed every time you spend it. You got a certain portion of it goes to these very evil people that continue use it to do more and more evil in the world every day. And but there's certain things that you do just because it's good, just because it's right. At giving your brothers and sisters some knowledge, sharing a piece of bread with another beggar, that's just right. And there's a certain karmic return. It's eternal. It's something they can't tax, they can't take away from you. So it's not like I don't gain by doing it. I'm being a proper child of my mother and my father, and I'm talking ultimate, Mother Earth and the Father of all spirits. I'm being a proper child, a proper son. I am concerned with my siblings, and as I want to set as many of them free as I can. You are no threat to me if you can become an even better and greater witch than I've ever been. That's I can tell you that ain't going to be easy, but it's doable. And if you are, well, see, I still got some kind of karmic return for doing that, providing you're a better witch. If you're a more evil witch, well, that's your choice.
Right.
And basically, those are your consequences too. And sharing that wisdom. So it's really kind of a good thing, and it's kind of a wealth beyond words. Um, when you read the book, you'll understand there's a lot of wealth in there. And I tried to keep my terms as generic as possible to suit everybody that reads it. I got some really great fan mail from Iran They consider themselves Persians, not Iranians. And they had read my book, Practical Witchery, a whole family. And they says, we considered our own culture and we've been thinking about it. We studied it. We're very into our own culture. And after I read your book, certain things come on. The stained glass spectacles came off and they saw their culture for what it really was. I mean, not just the bad things, but the gloriously good and beautiful things, the things that really have power and eternal consequence. And I wish I had the letter to recite it back to you. I mean, I was so glad. It was exactly what I was hoping to accomplish. Not everybody out there is Celts. I don't care who you are. Read the book. Try to understand the precepts that I give in there. The book is not an end-all book on the craft. It's a beginning. It's a place where you should be standing, no matter who you are, whether you're a witch or not, and gaining your own power. And I do my best to describe and explain as many things as I can in as easy a terms and as generic a terms as I possibly can.
Right. And John, I want to touch base too about how we discussed how rituals can become traps, insofar as some of these rituals that were created by other groups and organizations.
This is very true. The symbolism often used is misleading. Like I say, you can read your Bible as a Christian. I understand probably most people listening to this are Christian or came from a Christian family. And you can, we can recite that little verse, there is one mediator between God and man, and that is the man Christ Jesus. This is where some Protestants will take issue with Catholics over Mother Mary and all that other kind of stuff. And there's only one mediator, not Mary and not anything. And, they try to make, if God's your father, who's your mother? It's Mary. And it's like, no, your mother is the earth. You have elements of your mother. When your body breaks down, it is common dirt. Every element common to dirt. In fact, all the dirt that you're handling is basically much of the elements of many, 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 many other creatures over the millennia that have died and broken down. So you are a child of two parents, okay? But in the ritual of a priest standing up on a exalted podium higher than the rest of the congregation, between the cross and between the altar and the public, the lay people, at the symbology, the symbolism in there programs you. There's so many things about things that program you. Even when you take your dollar bill out and look at it and find all the things on it that programmed you. There's a lot of occult symbols. And it's kind of like, look, if that meant nothing, then why did they go so far to painstakingly put all of those things in there? And to enforce their authority over you in everything they do with these seals and sigils that basically over and over again program their authority over you. It's like, well, it's a free country. You can do what you want. It's kind of, look, it isn't. If you want to get married, I don't care if you're gay or straight, okay? If you want to get married, who do you got to ask permission? In fact, you got to pay somebody, don't you? You got to go to an authority to get the marriage license. You want to drive your car. You just bought a car or you built a car. You want to drive it? I'm afraid you're going to have to register it, and you're going to have to get a learner's permit and a driver's permit. You're going to have to get a driver's license. All right. You say you got the right to bear arms. Why would you have to file for a permit to carry one, or to carry it concealed on you, or to carry it in the open? Why do you got to ask for permission? Do you own your property? Well, my great-great-great-grandfather bought and paid for this property. No, you pay for it every year in taxes. And if you don't think so, stop paying your taxes one year and then see who owns it next.
Mm-hmm.
All right? There's nothing free about any of this. You got to wake up. You gotta get your knowledge. Knowledge is power. If they have it and you don't, they got power over you. And if you allow it, you are what's worse than a willing slave.
Exactly.
Your choice not to make a choice is a choice.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about disempowerment on their end to some degree. Yeah.
Right.
Without a
All
doubt.
of it, and that's what the symbolism of. Now, not all symbolism is about that. Understand what a thing means. Don't worry about, well, this is for Satan and that's for Satan. Look, I studied some of the stuff from the Golden Dawn and that too. I was raised in a completely different tradition. I'm a Danaan witch. I am not a Luciferian. I didn't come up through the Golden Dawn. Aleister Crowley, John Dee, and all those guys, they mean nothing to me. In fact, I've read their stuff and I've seen the traps in it. I remember some of my handlers trying to introduce me to the local Shriners and Masons. And it's like, look, you got a pentagram with 2 points upwards. I know where that comes from. I know the roots of that thing inside and out. Well, we're a Christian organization. You'll never, if Jesus is this and believes this and preaches that, and you got this, you cannot be the same thing. All right. As a pagan, I could look at that. As a pagan boy, I could look at that. And it's like, I know you're lying. I didn't say that outright. I was the pit looking back at them as they were studying me. And I was studying them. Mm-hmm. And I saw these things. It's like, learn it. Jesus says, look, I send you out among wolves. Even he said the world's a bad place. It's a rough place. It's a jungle out there. Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Well, I'm wise as a serpent. I'm also as deadly as a serpent, but that doesn't mean I'm going to kill everybody it's just, I can if I want to, or I feel I absolutely have to, but I choose not to. And I'm defined by my choices. You can say I've been a warrior and a killer my whole life. How can I be a pacifist? By choice, day by day, moment by moment. No guarantee that if you draw a gun that I'm going to be a pacifist a split second from now.
Right. And John, we have about 3 minutes plus or minus before the show ends here. I just want to thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. Like I said, you've been on the show several times over, and it's been a blessing. And also, I do want to wish you a happy Samhain. And let us know what happens when you go out there and check out what's going on with the activity.
Hopefully, the video will come out when I do it, and I'll get it posted up to YouTube. I'll be sure you get a link.
Cool. That'll be awesome. And I do want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening. And also, please stay tuned for Dr. J Radio Live coming up next here on the Dark Matter Digital Network. I think we have a few minutes here, plus or minus, John. But once again, it's been an awesome interview. And you have so much insight on so many different levels. We could talk for hours in one area, obviously. So we'll have to have you come back for sure. And insofar as we're discussing a little bit about power wars, psychic wars, technological wars. They all dovetail. And it seems to me like it's a lineage war. Do you think it has something to do with that?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But there was, like I say, originally Enoch wrote of over 200 what we called weirding clans. I'm kind of combining what Enoch taught and what I was taught as a Danaan witch. He talks about 200 rebel watchers, or Satan, small s, and these are extraterrestrials that landed on Mount Armin at the time, and they brought all this technology and craft, and they had their own agenda. Okay. They taught these women were witches, wise ones, okay, because they had this wisdom and they learned how to do these things. They learned how to take control of things and get resources and stuff, which ultimately benefited these watchers. All right. But there was over 200 weirding clans, and we have genetic switches turned on. Look, most people that are witches have a little something extra other than the 5 dogmatic senses. Okay, that's what gives them hey, there's something out there. What makes you think so? Because I know it, I feel it, and you're more apt to become a witch than somebody who doesn't. Why would you go there if you didn't think there was anything there? You got 13 of these families, the Illuminous clans, are the 13 most powerful families on the face of the earth. And it's all based on a funny money system, which is nothing but talismans. Take a look at it. You don't believe it? Look at it. Study it. Don't take my word for it. Don't take anybody's word for anything. Just make note of what they said and see for yourself.
Exactly. And well said, John. And once again, I think we're out of time here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Keith. Have a great week, everybody.